Thank you. Okay, so then good morning, everyone. And with this session, like the other ones, to be divided into two parts. The first part is a practice of bringing the mind into the present moment by observing the breath. And second part, analytical meditation. And then to focus that meditation around, I think it's the verse 30 of Bodhisattva's way of life. And these two virtuous mental factors, shame and consideration, that were listed in the commentary. And I think as Yaki translated them as shame and embarrassment. So then meditation on those two mental factors, virtuous mental factors. But to begin with, we spend some time focusing the mind on the breath. And before that, even to motivate to try to do this practice well, of just putting in a few minutes of time in this practice of focusing on the breath and try to make it really worthwhile. That if we are able to focus our mind to some degree, to settle the mind, then the settling of the mind, bringing some peace to the mind, of course, is very good for our state, for the state of our mind in general for the day. But also very good for us to be able to meditate on the second part of the meditation, and thereby having the best quality of mind in attending today's teaching. And discussion group and tutorial. So our business here is this first part, is to try with diligence to keep the mind focused on the breath, while at the same time being relaxed, understanding that the tendency of our mind at the moment, like a baby mind, it tends to wander. So our business here is to be conscientious and to try to bring the mind back, while at the same time not becoming agitated, because our mind might be all over the place. Our business is to, as best as possible, to bring the mind back to the breath. and with vigilance to be aware of the arisal of these distractions and to note these and not to be swept away by them. So if you have your own method which you employ, then to do that. Otherwise, the method can be to observe sensation of the air coming in and passing out again, and trying to be aware of the experience of the sensation of the air coming in and going back out. And each time the distractions arise, just to note them and then to bring the mind back. So let's just continue like this for the first part of the session. So then, with this second part, the meditation, reflecting on these two mental factors, virtuous mental factors. First one, shame, or a sense of self-respect. And second one, consideration, sense of consideration. Or as Yaki translated there as a sense of embarrassment. These two virtuous mental factors are said to be very important, foundation for ethics, ethical life. And if we can reflect on these and integrate them more and more in our life, we can really shape our life in a positive direction, particularly using our own personal experience in our life where we haven't possessed that sense of shame or self-respect, or haven't had a sense of consideration, or as I said, embarrassment. And also maybe where we've been able to observe it in the conduct of others. So then we can make this very experiential and not just words, not just ideas, but something that we try to really integrate into our life as an experience. So the first one then, shame, is based on, it's the idea of following virtuous activity based on this feeling of shame or self-respect. And particularly here, it's related to oneself. We're referring to shame and self-respect. Following virtuous conduct, avoiding non-virtuous conduct in relation to the sense of self-respect we have for ourselves, or that it would be shameful to act in inappropriate ways, or it would be shameful to avoid acting in a positive way when we could. And so this means really on the basis, if we, as Buddhists, as we integrate the understanding in our life of the Four Noble Truths, the truth of suffering, that suffering arises in dependence upon our own. The second one, the cause of the suffering comes from the afflictions. If we have this as an understanding, that we live our life according to this view, and we hear the teachings, and we've received, this human life as well, with the intelligence that we have. We've had upbringing, our parents put a lot of effort into providing us with the life we have. We've been taught to read and write. And then we make contact with Buddhism, the faultless teachings of Buddhism. And we understand about karma. Then bringing this all together as a responsible human being, it would be shameful for us to act in inappropriate ways. And also shameful for us when the opportunity arises, if out of indifference we didn't help others. It's a matter of self-respect. So it's not the same as pride, the arrogant pride Because arrogant pride arises on the basis of a puffed up sense of self-importance, based on that misunderstanding of oneself existing as an independent entity. And this pride is puffed up, and it's about supporting one's own abilities, capacities, or whatever. It's the number one thing. And with that, it carries with it always the possibility of harming others. Because there's someone always likely to threaten your reputation or your importance or whatever. But self-respect is based on an understanding of the truth of the teachings that one would not harm others, because we have the intelligence, we've been given an education, we receive the Dharma, we understand the Four Noble Truths, we have a human life, and to squander it in meaningless and destructive activity would be extremely shameful. So if we've really understood this in our life as we've made the contact with Buddhism or a spiritual path, and as we've grown up as an individual, become more mature, and if we can look back at earlier times, perhaps during times of adolescence, when there's often a lack of shame and self-respect, and you see how your wayward behavior is really quite shameful, then once we receive these teachings, it's a natural consequence of this that we would live our life. Important to have a sense of self-respect and a sense of shame. I remember in last retreat of Lama Zopa's in Bendigo, he used that word shame in relation to us on the Bodhisattva path, and how it is that, beings are conditioned by the mind of ignorance. And so if we don't reach out to help them, then it's like a blind man running to the edge of a cliff and us not reaching out to help them. It'd be extremely shameful to not do that. It's a matter of personal self-respect. So actually it's a wonderful thing if our life has unfolded and we understand this, that we have this inner protection, that we establish this set of values about our conduct. We're not puffed up about it, but we're protected by it. We're protected, it becomes our friend, this sense of self-respect or shame. But also, if we develop this and really in the heart and understand it, while at the same time are compassionate towards ourselves because we're an ordinary person with ignorance and we have the afflictions, then we're protecting ourselves from the experience of guilt, of having done harmful things and then feeling guilty about it. Because if we have the strength of shame, then by that state of mind, we're less likely to do the negative things which lead to guilt. But on the other hand, also, because we're an ordinary person, we have that sense of shame, but there's also conditioned by an understanding and kindness for ourselves about our human condition. The ignorance is pervasive and the habits negative habits of the mind are very strong. So with that understanding, you'd have shame, but you'd also be free of guilt. You'd have forgiveness, while at the same time understanding the importance of purifying, not indulging in guilt. So this understanding of this mental factor is extremely scientific. It's scientific and experiential. And it's a life-sustaining. And then this other second mental factor, virtuous mental factor, consideration or embarrassment. And this is avoiding destructive actions on account of other beings. So here it is, as we as Buddhists particularly, and other people observe us, and we don't want others to lose faith in the Buddha Dharma. So observe our behavior and make sure it doesn't become the basis for people losing faith in the Buddha Dharma. But also I don't know the range of that, using that mental factor consideration. Certainly it relates to that, in consideration of others losing faith, that we wouldn't do negative actions. And I don't know if that also, consideration also extends just into the whole field of consideration for others in a general way, in the general usage of the term. Because that is also very important, that we live our life with consideration for others. You know, if we live in a community with other people, how can that community function well if we don't have consideration for others? And how can we relate to others in a meaningful way if we don't have consideration for them? If we aren't aware of our actions, of our body and speech in particular, and how they affect other people each time we speak, the words that we say, do they hurt the other person or not? Are they the cause for upset? Are our actions the cause of upset for other people? So if we haven't got this factor of consideration for others in a general way, you know, we study the Dharma left, right and center, learn many things, but if we can't, in our interactions with other people, to continually keep the awareness of the consideration for them, how can we be the cause of harmony? And so this means also, even if other people are not considerate, that's their business. In relation to that, our business is a tolerance of them. Our business in relation to others, our conduct is to act with consideration for others. So also in relation to this, I'm not too sure when you talk about we have a relationship with a teacher, we have a guru, and it says you conduct your behavior ethically in dependence upon the remembrance of your guru or your teacher. That it would be shameful, having received the teachings from the teacher, to act in a negative way. So this is clearly a way to direct the behavior in a positive direction. The remembrance of the teacher, in dependence upon the teacher and the kindness of the teacher, one should not act in a negative way. So it'd be shameful, having received those teachings and given that guidance and the help and the sacrifice that a teacher may have made, to act in destructive ways. But it seems also that can be considered in the first mental fact of shame. We don't do it on the basis of shame. But it seems also aspect of it is also related to the second, in consideration of the teacher. I don't know, maybe that refers to the actual interaction with the teacher. But in any case, this relationship with the teacher is very important in terms of directing one's conduct in a positive way, not to act shamefully, and to act with consideration. So then, just to conclude then, to dedicate what are the positive results from doing this meditation to nurturing more and more within our lives these twin virtuous mental factors of shame or self-respect and consideration or embarrassment. So they become a foundation of in our life of ethics. And because ethics is a foundation for developing concentration and wisdom. And obviously a basis very much for how we interact with others in a mind, an attitude of non-harmfulness, loving kindness and compassion. So then from meditating in this way, it may be a case that these qualities, these mental factors flourish more and more in our heart. So we can be the embodiment of the Buddha Dharma, become the embodiment of Buddha Dharma, and thereby accomplish benefit of self and others. Okay, so thank you.
Thanks very much, Venerable Tony. Great.
Yeah.